Hello and welcome to the Life in Recovery podcast, episode 81 with me, John Loxley. This is life stories from people in recovery from substance and behavioural addictions, mental health issues and trauma, and also stories from people who are working in the recovery field or family members of people that are recovering as well. So I hope you're doing well, and today's episode is with Gary Aldridge, who is the service manager of a rehab down in Hertfordshire. Gary is in recovery from heroin and crack cocaine addiction. He's been clean for over 10 years, and it was a great story. I hope you enjoy listening to it as much as I enjoyed speaking with Gary.
It's interesting. I spoke at a 12-step meeting last night, and sort of the shift of doing sort of this sort of talk and then sort of speaking at a meeting, and when I think about sort of early experiences, like you say, sort of growing up for myself, you know, life was pretty okay. You know, like my early experiences in sort of childhood and things like that were relatively idyllic. If you looked in, it was very much like the sort of classic 2.4 sort of family. And I think at times in early recovery, when I ended up in a treatment centre, I found it hard to sort of identify with those that maybe had quite traumatic sort of upbringings and growing up. And I know that sometimes my own experiences and that sort of story is sort of very, very different. But I know the one sort of key element I did sort of identify with a lot of people was the fact that, you know, for me quite early on, I can now identify and recognise when I look back, it is you know, for me, I definitely felt uncomfortable with myself. And I think, you know, relatively speaking, a lot of children sort of do that, and sort of early teenage years, you know, feel quite awkward and that sort of anxiousness. But I think using drugs, using alcohol for me was just a way that just sort of nullified all of that and just sort of took any of that away from me. And when I look back now as an adult and having sort of spent quite a few years in recovery, using drugs at sort of 12, 13 years old, around that sort of mark, you know, it's a young time and a young age to be sort of smoking cannabis on a regular basis, on a daily basis, and you know, I know more now than ever the psychological damage of, you know, smoking drugs at that age, from a young age, of what that did to me. In hindsight, that's all stuff that I've learned from sort of being in recovery. At that time, I thought it was great. You know, I thought I was somebody. I thought I was something. You know, selling drugs and being around older people and that sort of excitement of being involved, doing things that were illegal. It was just, that was also part of the buzz, part of the excitement of being involved in sort of taking drugs. And I see now what that did at that point in terms of the direction it took my life. Sort of previous to that, like I said, growing up, you know, stable upbringing, stable parents, you know, relatively good role models, really. Dad was always out work regular. Mum was always there at home. I had good wider family in terms of grandparents and aunties and uncles, you know, really good role models, and have been in my life. But I guess, you know, that age, sort of smoking drugs and doing that, it took me from probably one course of life to another, a completely different course in life. The classic school reports were always, for me, was has the ability, just doesn't want to use it, far too distracted doing other things, that type of idea.
Could do better.
I played, could always do better. I mean, one teacher was it was always funny. It stuck with me for years. And when I got my first prison sentence, I always remember he remember him saying to me, he goes, "You're going to be the type of guy that I'm going to read about in the local newspaper in years to come, who's going to end up sort of in trouble and in prison." And it was true. He sees something at that age. Probably not a great thing for a teacher to be saying, but I played football as a kid, and sort of, when I look at it now, like lost opportunities. I was relatively okay at playing football, but smoking drugs from a young age, I ended up with a bad attitude. I just didn't bother. I didn't apply myself properly. I couldn't be told. I was argumentative. Spent most of my periods in school. I mean, I only just made it through school. I was lucky, really, that I got expelled, but my parents begged them to let me back, just so I could do some GCSEs, which all of those I got terrible grades, as a result. And by that age, by sort of 15, 16, I was drinking a lot, drinking after school, smoking lots of cannabis, experimenting now with sort of things like ease and stuff like that. And was cannabis a gateway drug? I don't know. I know that terminology quite well. I think, yes, it opened up a lot of pathways, but I think the underlying condition for me was I just didn't feel, okay with myself unless I had drugs within me. I suffered quite a lot of paranoia as a kid as well. There was periods of times where I felt like I couldn't leave the house without having headphones in, because there was people I thought were talking about me when I was walking down the streets, so sort of early signs of psychosis at sort of 16, 17 years old, which, I now can see, that sort of type of mental health problem as being, damaging in its way. But for me, it was, going around friends' houses, smoking bongs, playing computers, all of that. It was just, that was what we were all doing. And like I said, taking things like ease and that sort of all of a sudden become a lot more easier, a lot more available. I guess I enjoyed sort of being involved in a drug scene. There was that part that was quite exciting, and like I said, I enjoyed the thrill of selling drugs and being involved in that. Not that I ever really did anything in particular that well, like in that, I wasn't a criminal in any way. I just sold drugs just so I didn't have to pay for any, and it was, I was not really a criminal mastermind in any way. Because later on, one of my first prison sentences was a result of supplying drugs. And that was just sort of carelessness as a 19-year-old selling cocaine and things like that. And that was probably the first sort of turning point. I remember getting arrested, that sort of first serious arrest, really. And I needed help then at that age. I was in a lot of trouble. Like I had lots of drug dealers' money. My parents were now bailing me out, drug dealers out. I had drug dealers turning up at my mum and dad's house, wanting money, demanding money, racking up lots of debts, credit card debts, loans, all those sort of things. So the issues were really sort of cemented at that sort of age, at sort of like 19 years old. And when I look at it, at 19 years old, I should have been really enjoying life and being able to sort of forge out. If you think of like the ideal idea is sort of either going to university, forging out a career, sort of getting into relationships and sort of enjoying life. My life was one of having to run away from drug dealers, hide from drug dealers, bringing a lot of trouble to my mum and dad's door, them having to bail out thousands of pounds worth of their own sort of savings and money, to get me out of trouble. And then it just didn't get any better from there. It got a lot worse. I was, like I said, by that time I was sort of becoming unemployable. I was completely unreliable. I couldn't really maintain or hold any sort of types of jobs down. I'd been working in retail up until that point, and I got made redundant. And I think when I look now, it's sort of a key turning point really at that sort of age, as well. Sort of managing to, in some ways trying to manage to hold it down, but in other ways just really wasn't. I was becoming frequently known to the police as well. Drinking lots at that time and getting into lots of trouble.
What's your kind of understanding then of like, you talked about right from an early age you just didn't feel comfortable in yourself, and you're kind of saying that you can't really pinpoint any particular thing at home as to the reason why you would feel that way. Like, obviously now you've been in recovery for quite a while, and I presume similarly to me, you said at the start that you've been 12-step fellowship, so I presume that you've been through the steps, got a sponsor, and do all the suggestions. What's your take on why that kind of manifests in certain individuals?
Yeah, I think there's numbers of factors. I think the potential underlying way that I felt about myself being sort of one key factor. I think from a social point of view, the moment I sort of got involved with drugs, I left one friendship group and moved to another friendship group very quickly, and then ended up sort of bouncing in between the two really. But almost sort of the second friendship group were much more involved in drugs, so I become part of that. So I see that sort of social aspect. It wasn't so much sort of like peer pressure. It was just, I sort of fell into that sort of crowd with what we were doing. Having, like you said, been in the 12 steps, done a lot of sort of therapy as well. I think drugs give me something that was completely missing within myself, personality. I think it gave me a character and sort of an identity that I hadn't really sort of had or forged out in any way myself. And the using of drugs just meant I just didn't really have to sort of be with myself in any way.
Yeah, that's interesting. I like that, what you just said there about the identity thing. I think that I've never actually really considered that in so much detail. My story is very, very similar to yours. So at that age, didn't realise that I didn't know who I was, and I didn't realise how much my creating of this character, because I got into DJing, so it was like a persona that I, had, that I kind of elaborated more and more, and people, I suppose. I just did a podcast with another DJ actually, and he was saying that like people would look in the DJ booth and never know. They would never have any idea that how I was actually feeling. I resonated so much with it. But that was like, you could have said that about life in general. If from the outsider's perspective looking in, you'd have looked at me and thought, God, he's really confident. He's really, he's like winning at life. You know what I mean? And actually,
yeah.
I was like really struggling.
Yeah. I remember being sort of 18, 19 and really sort of involved in sort of taking class A drugs, sort of E's, and it was cocaine sort of creeping in, crack cocaine at that time, and just feeling very lonely, like walking home at early hours in the morning and just feeling like desperately lonely in myself. But at that age, just didn't really know, how to reach out to anyone. I didn't really know how to say to anyone, like, I don't want to really be doing this, but I don't know how to stop now. Like I'm so far into it. And I guess I sort of had a bit of this sort of party animal identity, sort of in pubs a little bit, and known for selling drugs. but what come with me was lots of trouble. Like I said, like drug dealers and police and things like that. So what happened very quickly is people distancing themselves from me because they didn't want to be sort of getting into what I was getting into, you know, and then those friends that I'd been at school with, they sort of just forged ahead with life. Like they just then, you know, sort of focused on careers, got into relationships, and very quickly I just got left behind. And then the using of the drugs just become more and more, and I just fell deeper and deeper into using drugs, and then like drugs like crack cocaine and heroin come along, and then before I know it, it's like years have passed by and they're well gone, those friends at school, and I'm out shoplifting, I'm out doing whatever it is that I can do on a daily basis just to feed that addiction. Yeah, and like I said, it become quite lonely.
Yeah, I think it's a fine line, isn't it, between kind of going right over the deep end and not really, because I was quite lucky in the sense that I actually stopped. I mean, I took all the drugs that you were saying, apart from when it come to like crack cocaine or heroin, I wouldn't go anywhere near them, but only out of luck, really, because I think ultimately it's like right time, right place, isn't it? Somebody offers it you and you say yes for the first time, and you know, and that happened with other drugs. I mean, you know, I was taking pills for years, and then all of a sudden somebody offered me some ketamine, and it was like, I don't do that, and then I took it, you know, and then that was it. Then I was taking it, you know, and I never really liked it, but I would still take it. And then the same with other drugs. And yeah, I mean, as soon as you get on the crack and the heroin, it's game over, isn't it?
Yeah, and it was, and very, very quickly life went from one place to the next. I got my first heroin habit in prison. I think I was 20 odd years old, maybe 20, just turned 21. And I didn't really know or understand what I was getting myself into at that point. And the first bit of treatment I got introduced to was the RAP program.
That's what I used to work for.
Yeah. I was in the Mount prison. I was the youngest on the wing as well, and so my first concept of recovery, or my first introduction to it, was sitting in. If I've tracked back a little bit, the reason why I did the RAP program was I was appealing my sentence. And in order to make it look better that I was on a drug treatment program, I was like, I'd gone to a carrot worker and said, look, I've got a heroin habit here now in prison. I need help. And they quickly fast tracked me onto the RAP program. But really it was about trying to get off the wing because I owed people money and I was in debt. And I knew that I needed to do something to look good towards this appeal process. And it was my first introduction to recovery. So they would be group sessions, workshops, 12-step meetings, and I remember sort of sitting there, you know, I was 21, just about at that age, sort of looking around, just thinking, well, I'm just not like you guys, you know, sort of that real sort of disidentifying myself with what was really going on, when really, if I look back at it now, I was exactly like those. But I was just a much younger age, and that's probably, if I didn't have stopped later on in life, I was going to go back there anyhow. I was always going to end up back in that same place. But that was the first introduction, the sort of meetings, and I think I did a life story and maybe started a step one at that point as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I was. That was my first job when I changed careers. It's Rehabilitation for Addicted Prisoners Trust, but they're called Forward Trust now, aren't they?
Yeah.
But yeah, I've facilitated those types of groups and stuff, and it was an absolutely amazing job. I loved it. I loved working in the prisons. But yeah, I can just imagine you, because obviously I've worked with so many young guys, like similar to the situation that you were in. But it's such a young age, isn't it? And you know, like, as you were saying, it's like your first heroin habit. You don't know exactly what you've got yourself into. And the thought, I mean, even the concept of recovery to somebody so young, it's just such a massive thing and very difficult to kind of get your head around, I would imagine.
Yeah, it was, and I left that prison sentence, left that program, and I started using straight away, and I very quickly just ended up back in sort of the same place as well. And I think it was seven or 8 years later of various different treatment interventions and programs in the community, working with community-based drug and alcohol teams and services and stuff like that, where methadone scripts, things like that, trying to get me to stop. In and out of prison a few more times before. And I spoke about this last night. Actually, what happened was there was a guy. I was on probation at the time, and this probation officer was doing her very best to try and keep me out of prison. She was trying all these different sort of avenues of detox, like DTTO programs and things like that. And I met this guy who'd been living in Bournemouth at the time, and I think he was about 6 or 7 years clean at that time, and he'd been in recovery. He was in 12-step program, and after my probation appointments, he used to take me out for coffee, and she was just like, I want you to just go and listen to this guy's story and go and spend some time with him, and hopefully he might be able to help you. And what he did was he didn't sort of like beat the drum of the 12 steps at me or anything like that. What he just did was just drip fed bits of information to me, which it caught my interest. Like, he spoke my own language. Like, he wasn't as like a polished professional in any way, but he was just like, look, you don't really need to be doing these things anymore. There is another way. It's like, if you want the help, if you want to get clean, there is, the ability for you to get clean. And he sort of shared bits of his story, and just, he was saying to me, you need to go into rehab, you need to go and spend time away from this area. And I think that sort of seed was sort of the starting point, really, I guess, for myself.
What area were you based in then?
So I was living in Hertford at the time, yeah. And I ended up getting funded for treatment. At the time, what had happened is as well, I'd become a prolific offender with the police. So I was known as a PPPO. So I was assigned a police officer. I had to have weekly meetings with the police officer, my probation, the drug and alcohol team. There was a multidisciplinary team just working with me, just to sort of get me out of the area, get me into treatment, which eventually sort of happened. I guess that's where recovery sort of started. I ended up in treatment in a treatment centre in Bournemouth. I was talking to, this is the mad thing, so now I work in services, and I was talking to a commissioner the other day about, I went into treatment in 2010, and this is back in the day when treatment services were much more funded, I guess is the only word that I can use. So I was given a year's funding at that point, which, in today's world, in terms of community-based funding for residential rehabs, and that's just unheard of. No one gets funded for a year. You're lucky if you get 6 months these days. It's good. If you get 3 months, that's probably bog standard. I got, at that time, the treatment services were giving out a year, and I think I took about 9 months of it, and then I think there was funding for housing down in Bournemouth, and then sort of aftercare stuff and counselling. Like the package was, and I guess, I'm a byproduct of that sort of type of investment now. Sort of 10 years down the line of not relapse, of continuous sobriety. I've worked in the field now for 10 years nearly myself, from being a peer mentor and volunteer to now a service manager myself of a residential treatment centre. So yeah, I was lucky to get that type of funding and that type of investment in myself. considering the sort of the state of social care and funding these days of where things are at.
So did the rehab introduce you to the 12 steps then?
Yeah, they were a 12-step treatment centre. I didn't really have much of a choice. What happened was I think it was a dip worker I had at the time, and the drug and alcohol team were like, you are going to a 12-step treatment centre, and that's sort of it. You're not really given much of a choice. And I know that doesn't work these days in community-based services, but it was like, this is where you're going. And we used to have H&I, hospital institutions used to come in, and they were great. NA, AA, CA, and then we used to have to go to meetings. That was part of the program. There was part of the treatment program is that I think you had to do 3 to 5 meetings a week minimum, something like that as well. Yeah, I got excited by going to the meetings and just hearing people, their own experiences, their stories, very similar to mine. And we're quite happy, look quite comfortable, and we're enjoying life. And people were talking about getting their first passport. They were talking about going on holidays. They were talking about getting married. They were talking about losing loved ones and still staying clean and sober. They're talking about going to get degrees. They were talking about just being able to enjoy life now, not using. And I sort of believed what they were saying. The South Coast, Bournemouth, where I was, the meetings were almost like mini conventions. Like they used to get like 100 odd people to a meeting on a Monday night. It was like, it was exciting, sort of being around that, the sort of the buzz of it. The recovery down there at that time, it was quite a good thing to be a part of as well.
It's still renowned for being a recovery hub of the UK, isn't it, really, Bournemouth? It's like got a massive... I mean, because I think, is there quite a few treatment centres down there? Because it's got like a massive recovery community, hasn't it?
Yeah, I think when I was down there, so I was down in a treatment centre called Street Scene. They had 2 down there, and there was the Providence Project. There was Quinton House, but that closed down at one point, and there was a couple of others, I think, as well. But there was massive recovery, but there was also quite a lot of addiction down there as well. And I think there was a lot of problems with sort of the both sides of it. You could get recovery down there easily. There's about 100 odd meetings a week. I think when I was down at that time, there's probably more now. When I moved out of supported housing and I got my own first flat down there, I lived on a road where I think in a space of sort of 10-minute walk, there was like 4 or 5 different meetings I could have gone to. It was so accessible. It was so easy. It was so on your door there. It was pretty hard not to get recovery if you didn't want it. Yeah, really.
That's cool. We've been sober, clean, about similar amount of time, same amount of time as me as well, which is fantastic. 10 years is a milestone, isn't it? How do you feel like? I mean, I know for me, I was told actually in fairly early recovery, like this old timer, he said to me, like, he said your first 5 years is kind of like pulling your head out of your backside, basically, and then for another 5 years you kind of have a look around and start to kind of find yourself. He said, and when you get to about 10 years, he said, hopefully by that point, if you've done the work, you should start to know yourself and know what it is that you want from your life, and then start building on those foundations. And that's kind of been my experience, really. Has that been similar for you?
Yeah, I would definitely say like the early part of recovery, again, it's always been in hindsight, like looking back, I was 28 when I come out of treatment, and I'd been using class A drugs for like a decade, and I didn't really have any life skills. I didn't really know how to be in the world as a man, as an individual. I very much felt like a kid in a man's body. I'd like just overwhelmed with anxiety and emotions, and found it very difficult at times sort of being with myself in any way. And it got better, it got easier. And I think that the thawing out process definitely happened between about 3 years to 5 years, where suddenly started to feel a little bit like I'm okay with myself, and started to sort of get to grips with the world, because unfortunately the world doesn't really stop, does it? Just because you're in recovery, then it's like you've got to go and get a job. Well, you don't have to, but if you want to do anything with yourself in the life, then you're going to need to do those things. So that means about being responsible, and means about turning up. I was educating myself. I didn't know how to, like, it's a funny thing, when I got into recovery, like I didn't even know how to use the internet, and I didn't know how to have I didn't have an email address, I didn't have any of that stuff. Everything I had to do, I had to learn in recovery. So sometimes it was excruciating and painful, sort of having to do those things. When I went to go and get my first health and social care qualification, I went for an interview at the college. You haven't got enough qualifications to get on a foundation course, like the starting part. So I had to go back and do my GCSEs. So being nearly 30 years old, sat in a classroom with sort of 15, 16-year-olds that haven't sort of made it in school themselves, or having to retake their GCSEs, it's really uncomfortable. I found it really painful, just sort of like the embarrassment of doing that, but sort of having to forge ahead each time and thinking, well, I'm doing this because of a purpose. I'm doing this because I want to get somewhere. And things quickly caught up. Eventually, like I did, I got employed, and I started to get qualified and do some qualifications, and I think I started to get some self-worth about myself and some character, and sort of start to understand myself. But I think, by sort of the third, or between years 3 and 5, it was definitely a painstaking process of sort of growing up a little bit, and having to do almost what I call like being like an adult, having to sort of be assertive and learn those things, and learning how to speak up and stuff like that. I didn't really know how to do a lot of those things. Well, I learned a little bit in the treatment centre, but never had the practical application or the ability to do them in sort of real situations as well. And I would say from year 5 to 10, has definitely been a massive sort of maturing process, and sort of like getting some sort of almost like emotional sobriety, really, about not being so reactive, and being able to understand about how I tick and how I operate as a man, and being a man in sobriety as well, and understanding how to conduct myself in a workplace, in a work environment, because what's come is more and more responsibility. As I said, I manage a service now, so I'm responsible for people. I have to look after, line manage people, and these are not skills I had. These are things I've had to learn on the job and through training and application, and it's stuff that's not come quite easy, but certainly taught a lot about myself as an individual.
Done amazingly well, to considering from like where you've come from to be a service manager. That's like some feat, isn't it? And congratulations, and well done for that. How long have you been managing the service for then?
Not short of about 18 months. Yeah. Which comes with its own pressures, and it comes with its own responsibilities. Some of it's been really great, and really get to enjoy doing some of the things I do, and then there's really hard parts, having difficult conversations with people and managing people, and having to manage people in terms of professionally, I've had to learn lots of those things, and it's been great. It's been great experiences. And I think more so maybe the last year, and then because of what we've been going through, everyone, with the lockdown and stuff, I've definitely learned to start slowing down. It's been like for me, being in recovery, what happened is when I got clean at 28, and then I started reconnecting with all my old school friends, and I started to look around, and I was like, oh my God, like I've just lost sort of 10, 12 years of my life to drug addiction. And these guys have got mortgages, and they're getting married, and they're having their first kids. And I know it's no good to do comparisons, but I was at college sitting there doing my GCSEs again. And I was just like, and it took a while to forge my own career and get to my own place where, quite settled with myself a little bit now. And, I know the material things, they're sort of the byproducts of being in recovery, and then they're important, but they're not important as well. They've just come with the fact of being in recovery. None of this stuff I've been able to do and achieve and experiences come from not being in recovery. If I wasn't in recovery, none of this would be here. And I'm in no uncertain terms about that. Recovery always is and does come first for me. It's just that sort of solid foundation. Still go to sort of regular meetings. I still speak with my sponsor on a regular basis. I'm involved in a men's group that we do once a month as well, which is really good for me. Yeah.
Is that outside of recovery? Is that something separate, or is that part of 12 steps?
It's part of 12 steps, yeah. There's 4 of us that get together once a month, and we sort of do like this sort of a bit of a check-in with each other, and we use a format. And unfortunately on lockdown we've having to do it online, but previously, before we go into each other's houses, have some food with each other, spend time with each other. I think having a busy life and sort of working and relationships and families and everything that comes with life, sometimes it can be hard to always find time to do those things. But I find if I have it as a regular commitment as something, then I'll commit to doing it, and it's good for me, and it's good for me to connect with other men in recovery.
Well, I was going to ask you actually about like personal life. So, are you how does that look for you?
Yeah, so I moved back from Bournemouth 5 years ago, and living back in my hometown has been great. My family were a bit anxious, I think, originally when I first decided that I was going to move back.
Yeah, they were.
Yeah. My mum was, particularly anxious. They went through, so much. When I look back at it now, dragging them all over the country to different prisons, coming to visit me, and the police, and all the trouble and the worry and the stress. Working in a rehab now, I see it. Now when I'm dealing with clients and their families and they're ringing up, I see it more and more now. But it's been good. It's been good moving back and sort of being locally again. Personal life in terms of just keeping things in check sometimes, like with the gym, and I can watch my addictive nature at times. Sometimes sort of and I felt like in the last sort of year, 18 months, got much more of a balance with that stuff. Sort of watching those addictive processes. I've been at times quite obsessed about the gym and fitness and stuff like that, and money and earning and working long hours and really pushing myself. And actually, I think one of the good things that's come out from being in the lockdown is forced me to slow down. I think a long time in recovery, I've had the mindset that I've needed to catch up with everyone. I've needed to catch up with life. And actually, I realise now, actually, enjoying life, enjoying that time out with my partner, doing things, disconnecting from work, working in the field, being in recovery can be quite intense sometimes as well. It's like, sometimes you just don't get a break from it. So, enjoying things like holidays, going away, interests, really important, I think, for me as well, because I've seen what can happen to me when I do too much of too many different things like work and just not enjoying myself. It becomes a bit flat and mundane for me.
Yeah, I'm very similar. I've got to keep myself entertained with like creative pursuits, otherwise I go crazy. That's what this is all about as well, actually. This podcast was born out of that, I suppose, in a way, because well, I mean, the only stipulation that I had right from the very beginning was just to try, hopefully, that it help people having these conversations, you know, and that's definitely happening, which is great. But I just enjoy it. Like it's one night a week that I sit and have these conversations with people that I would never normally speak to, and it's great because it's lovely to hear lovely to hear your recovery, and I've related like massively all the way through. I've not said a right lot because kind of been nodding along, and you know, obviously we're at the same kind of time in recovery, so I think that we're probably experiencing similar things. What you just said there about, you know, like getting on top of the other addictions, that's been pretty much the case for me over the last year to 18 months. Is, you know, I was similar in the gym all the time whenever I got any spare time, and I've kind of curbed that now. I go for a run, you know, 2 or 3 times a week and do a little bit of fitness in the house, but that's it. And then just watching the food for me. Has food been an issue for you? Chocolate and sweets and all that kind of stuff, has that been an issue?
I think, yeah, definitely. At one point with the gym and sort of food, just becoming quite rigid with it, and this sort of whole sort of clean eating idea, and just sort of becoming quite intense with it, quite focused. And I think what I noticed when I come out of that sort of phase is when I'm struggling or changes are going on in my life, i.e. taking new roles or stuff going on in, say, my personal life, then I tend to do those things. I tend to sort of reach out a little bit like how I did when I used drugs. I look for something externally to sort of try and manage for a while, and then, but sometimes it can sort of get out of control a little bit, and then it's like, oh, I need to pull that sort of back in. And food can definitely be one of those ones as well, that I've noticed that, yeah, they sort of go a bit sort of hand in hand in terms of the exercise and food, and yeah, just sort of being quite rigid and quite focused around it. And then on the opposite end is then going all out with things like that, you know, sugar and stuff like that as well. So yeah, it's an ongoing thing and sort of trying to maintain it. Yeah, it's I think, yeah, well, there's like the two sides of the coin, aren't there? Like the one side is the control. It's like, right, I'm going to control everything that I'm doing because I feel a bit out of control in my life here. And then the other side of the coin is everything's kind of fine and everything's going too well, so I'm just going to binge, just like have a blowout. You know, it's really difficult to find the balance, isn't it? But I mean, the only thing that I've been told from people that are kind of further along the path is it just gets better over time. You know, it just gets progressively better. You know, and it's like it says in our literature, doesn't it, that your spiritual condition is contingent on the work that you're doing each day. So I love there's a person who goes to my meetings and she always says I never take a day off, and I love that, you know. But like my experience has always been that if I've ever taken any time off, like if I decide that I'm not gonna give it my all every day, then, you know, I start to get a little bit wobbly. But yeah, man, it sounds really good. It sounds like you've got a great life. What's your what would you say that life in recovery means to you? I guess it's that sort of sense of freedom now, more than anything else. Like, I don't feel restricted in any way. Whereas I think previously, before, you know, the drugs were like a chain around me. But yeah, definitely that sort of sense of freedom. I don't feel like there's nothing, if I didn't want to do something or I didn't apply myself, I'd be able to go and do that. I guess I've never ever felt sort of that way, and I do now. Yeah.
Brilliant. And what would you say if you had to give a piece of advice to somebody that was, you know, maybe struggling or thinking about making a change? What would you say?
I would say give yourself some time and commit to recovery. It's not an overnight matter. It's stuff that, you know, you need to be able to at least give that bit of time. And I think that's what I see a lot of people sort of trying to get into recovery do, is they leave before things get better quick. Like early recovery doesn't get great all the way straight away for people. I think just give it time, because things do get better, and once you're in recovery and you're around the right people, things happen quite quickly and doors open quite quickly for people. And yeah,
brilliant. Well, thanks very much for your time this evening.
No worries.
Yeah, mate. And
it's been great. Yeah, thanks for having me on.
No worries, mate. Good luck with your recovery, and thank you again.
Yeah, no problem.
Cheers, pal.
Yeah, cheers.
Take care. Thanks for listening, and if you've been affected by any of the issues discussed in the podcast, please see a range of mutual aid organisations in the show notes. Also, don't forget that you can support the Life in Recovery podcast by visiting patreon.com/lifeinrecovery. Peace and love, and goodbye for now.